It's recruiting season in Gainesville. We are going to talk about that before the Gators kick off their week 1 game against the Utah Utes this Thursday. All that on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. We're talking recruiting most of the day today because the Florida Gators do play this week, but you still got to recruit. It is always recruiting season in Gainesville now. Before we talk about that, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. If you haven't yet signed up for Florida Victorious, while we're talking recruiting, you know the rule here. If you're not signed up for Florida Victorious, you can't complain about recruiting to me. Those are the rules. If you do want to sign up for Florida Victorious and you want to save 20% off your first month, use promo code LOCKED to save 20% off of your first month with Florida Victorious. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. And before we talk Florida Gators recruiting, I do want to remind you that LinkedIn is the college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. And Brian, we're spending a bit of time talking about a recruit that we've barely talked about this cycle in Jordan Seaton out of IMG. What kind of player is Jordan Seaton on film?
I've seen him in person a few times. I know him. Very dedicated kid. He went from being overweight and 300 and some pounds to svelte and 280 in about 4 months. He locked in, and he's at IMG. So he's getting good coaching. He is the kind of kid that is technically as sound as it gets, and he just understands his position, what's coming at him. He's very advanced mentally. So this is not your typical teenager. He's a young man that's going to make plays all around physically. Like when you walks up to you and shakes your hand, you know it. He's a massive kid still. He's 285, 290, but he's lean, and he's still got all the traits you're looking for physically to play on the edge. So I like him a lot. I think he'll play right or left tackle. But most importantly, he is a technician and he takes to his craft. He loves it. So he's the kind of guy that could probably play pretty early.
Is he someone who, I know you just said he could play left or right? Do you view him like as a better fit at one spot or the other?
If I had to guess, like his mentality is more left because he's more technician, but now he's starting to slowly add a little bit of weight, and he's just trying to not do it too fast. So he keeps his quickness, etc. I'll be curious to see what he's like by the end of the year. I think I'm going to see IMG twice this season. I'm curious to see what he's like at the end of the year as compared to this summer and how he's changed his body even more, because like he looks like $1 million right now. But if you add 15 pounds, sometimes guys don't handle it right. We'll see, but he's really, really quick, and he has just an eye for what's going to happen. He anticipates as well as any offensive tackle in the class of 24. So Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Florida, and numerous other programs agree with my statement because they've all offered him and are recruiting him. And that, as they say, is the bottom line. So my opinion doesn't mean much, but Kirby Smarts, etc., those kind of guys, they do. And Florida is a school that's been on him. We were interviewing Jordan a couple of weeks ago at IMG for their media day, and one of the Florida reporters was there, a couple of them actually, and they were asking him questions, and he's planning on visiting and trying to figure out the date and all that kind of stuff. But he is going to be a late decision. I don't know if that bodes well or not for the Gators, but like Jordan's not close to making a decision, but I do know Florida's definitely in the mix.
He might not be close to making a decision. I am putting you a little bit on the spot here. Not to make the prediction, but just if you're a Florida Gators fan at this point, how would you feel about the potential of Jordan Seaton to really, I guess, cherry on top this class?
It's very possible because he's just open-minded. He's building relationships and looking at this as a business partnership. Where do I fit in? How would I be used? How comfortable am I? What relationship do I have with the line coach, the head coach, etc.? He's looking at it very broad and, again, mature. Not your typical teenager. Jordan Seaton understands the process because Lord only knows there are a lot of teenagers that get fooled in the recruiting game consistently. Jordan Seaton will not be one of those.
And where would he kind of take Florida's offensive line haul as just a whole? If he were to join, Fletcher Westfall's the blue chip guy right now, you've got Marcus Maskell, you've got Noel Portniagen from Germany, you've got Mike Williams, former South Carolina commit. So if you can add Jordan Seaton to that, how does that kind of round out this? I mean, they'd be 5 guys, so you'd have a full O-line, but how would that kind of round out the class there for Florida?
I think it's very important because they need somebody that's polished. If they're going to take a 5th lineman, it can't be a project or a long-term guy. He's about as polished as it's going to get. For those of you that don't know, IMG Academy is as close to an NFL kind of deal as it gets. I've worked there. I know what it's like. They've got not 1, but 2 weight rooms that are NFL-like. Literally. Everything they do is based on elite. The competition that he goes, like David Stone's a guy he works against. You know what I mean? Like, it's their defensive line is all power 5. They have dudes. So it's interesting to me that he's getting that training, and it's part of the reason he made the jump. But that'll also help him, whether he goes to Oklahoma, Florida, whatever, it'll help him make the transition and adapt that much quicker.
And how is he athletically, I'll say, because we like technically sound, we know. Is he complete package with the athleticism as well, or is he more technician than anything else?
More technician. Again, he's adjusted to his body, so I need to see a game since he's lost the weight. It's one thing to go through, like we saw a scrimmage in the spring and stuff. They did inter-squad, and he played some, and I've seen him in drills. I haven't seen him play against anybody else since he's changed his body. I need to see somebody that, can handle him at least every now and then to see how he counters. It's if you lose a rep, you got to wipe it clean and go to the next one. Well, they play St. Francis later this year. That's generally a good sign on what's going to happen. I mean, they got dudes. So I want to see him go against that squad and maybe 1 or 2 others. And I'll go to a practice or something and I'll talk to him. But I would be surprised if I don't end up being impressed.
This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege and get on your way to being your best self. Whether you're dealing with decisions around your career, relationship, football season starting, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate your life. So you can move forward with confidence and excitement. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege today to get 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege. Florida put an emphasis this past summer, especially, and that seems to be the approach that Billy Napier and this coaching staff are going to continue to take, putting emphasis on taking the official visits during the summer more than the fall, and kind of putting a focus point on recruiting in those summer months when you're off. How do you feel about that approach from this Gators coaching staff?
That's something that myself and other recruiting analysts have talked about. Is it better to get it over early or to wait? It's kind of a conundrum because you're going to have kids on campus anyway. You have to do it. They don't want to do it. Trust me, they don't want to. But if the kids aren't on your campus, they're on your rival's campus. So it's a distraction, but there's no way around it. So official visits are a lot more engaging. There's more academic stuff. There's more time that you spend on campus. By NCAA rule, you get 48 hours. I'm not a huge fan of it. I would rather they take the official in the summer and unofficial in the fall, but this is more the guarantee to get a kid to come. It just depends on the player. Like certain kids, when they say, yeah, coach, I'll be back in the fall, you believe them. Other kids, not so much. So it depends on the player. And we're talking about Florida kids, which is a little more iffy anyway, by and large. So I think it just comes down to what Billy and his staff think. They've done a great job of analyzing Florida kids, North Carolina kids, Mississippi kids. They've done a great job this year. So I'm going to guess they've kind of figured it out. But unless it's an elite kid or somebody that's really like Seaton just going to make a late decision, I'd prefer the visits in the summer when you're just focusing on recruiting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where you have that trade-off of, if they take the official visit during like the actual fall and during the season, like they get that whole experience of 48 hours with game week and everything. But in the summer, you get to spend a lot more time focusing on them and not so much on Tennessee, September 16th, for example, for Florida home game. But is there not that also risk of, if you don't lock them down in the summer, then fall, you don't get that official, you don't get that time, and it's kind of harder to make up ground at that point if you're, we'll say, Florida and you're behind on a kid?
If you fall behind or for whatever reason you start recruiting a young man later, it is rough. It is rough. You bring up a very good point. I don't think Florida's done a bad job with that. They came in prepared. And of course, there's always the late bloomer. But if you bring in the kid early, not only do you learn about the young man, the process itself is so complex. I could do an hour just on this question, but who's the guardian? Who's the decision maker amongst them? How involved is the head coach? You need to find those things out, because a lot of times multiple people will tell the coaching staff of whatever school, I'm the one. And then you really got to find out in the weeds what's going. Don't get me started. There's stories for days, but you need to find out who's the decision maker. It's like when you go to buy a car, the salesman wants to know, is it the wife? Is it the guy? Is it both? They don't know who the decision maker is. They're not getting the sale. It's the same deal with recruiting. So you got to find those things out, and you have to understand the parameters. What are they looking for? The sooner you find that out, the better. And that's another reason I'd rather have it in the summer, because you can always get a kid back on campus, hypothetically, for an unofficial visit, because you want to get one for a school for official. But that data, seeing person face-to-face, having an eye-to-eye contact, and having a heart-to-heart, are you interested in our institution? Man, that's important. You can do all the video chats like you and I are doing right now. It's not the same if we were hanging out at a restaurant in New York City talking football. It's just different being face-to-face. So the sooner you do that, in my opinion, the better.
And how important is it for Florida? Because you have almost a full class of commits already if you're Florida. How important is it to kind of constantly be in contact with those guys to keep them from having wandering eyes during the season, especially because I feel like this is a big point, especially on like college football fan Twitter, that they like to go off on this. Every time you lose a game, it's up, you're losing the class. We saw it with Miami last year. They kept most of their class when it was things are going horrible. Things did go horrible on the field last year for Miami, but the class stayed. Florida didn't have an awesome year last year. Most of the class stayed, aside from, a certain NIL debacle. But how important is it, if you're Florida, to kind of be in contact with these current commits to keep them really committed to your staff, your program, and just the process?
The number one thing in recruiting is always the same. NIL, the bag, whatever it is that gets a kid to go to a school, relationships. There are kids that I know that either A, took nothing or took less in the last 25, 30 years I've been around recruiting. And these are face-to-face conversations after the fact because of relationships. If Florida does their due diligence, and I know I've said this on your show before, it's not that hard to sell UF. It's not. SEC, really cool campus, the swamp, blah, 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 tradition. Do your due diligence, stay involved. I know a lot of head coaches don't like doing it, even some assistants. Do it anyway, and they will come. If you do not, it is on you, not the recruit.
And I just wanted your take on this part real quick, because you mentioned, selling tradition, the swamp, all that stuff. Swamp Kings came out last week on Netflix, and it's like the docu-series about Florida, Urban Meyers, all that stuff. If you don't know, how, I want to say, relevant is that to recruiting? Because a lot of the things that were talked about there happened when current recruits were just being born. some weren't even born yet. I mean, it was 18 years ago it started, and it ended 13 years ago. So I feel like for a lot of kids or a lot of recruits, this is maybe their first time like learning about the Urban Meyer Florida Gators, which obviously they didn't learn what really happened with them for the most part. But how important is that for recruits to kind of be like, okay, Florida at least was this elite program for a bit?
I think it's important to see that a school can reach the pinnacle. Well, let's take it to another example. You got to give credit to Spurrier, Bowden, and just all three of the big three. Because at one point, going into the early 80s, which one of the big three was good? They all sucked. They all sucked. Florida State was the first one to start inching. Like Florida at the end of the 70s was terrible. Miami was terrible. They hired good coaches, Snellenberger, Miami, etc., and then Jimmy Johnson. It's about coaching again, and they built relationships. They all went out and recruited hard. So you got to do that, man. And now that those kids see that, when they walk into Miami or Florida State, do you think they see some trophies? Do you think that matters? You're darn right it does. Florida's got national championships. They've got Heisman winners. It matters. Yeah, you're going to sell your tradition. They may not have seen it with their own eyes unless they were like 4 or something. I get it. But that's what video is for. This is what the swamp is like when we're winning. This is how you can come to our program and be a part of that. You can be the next guy. These are things that I know coaches have told me on how they sell. This isn't my information. This is what I've been told for years. This is how you get there. Florida has a lot to sell, man. Championships are part of it.
Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer that you won't want to miss. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Yeah, and we'll wrap up today talking about just 2025 because we're at the point, almost September. Florida plays football this week. At what point does the focus from this coaching staff, or really just any coaching staff in college football, shift from, hey, let's wrap up 2024 on a strong note, keep our guys, maybe add a couple final pieces to the puzzle here, and shift from that to let's build 2025 for just the future and working ready for building relationships for the summer and earning those commitments later?
It already has. August 1st. That's when the NCAA's rule, and this, it had been September 1st forever. I don't know why they changed it, but it's the NCAA. They don't make any sense. So at least they're consistent with that. There's anybody wants to argue with that, well, we can gamble. I'll take on
you ain't getting an argument from me here.
August 1st allowed text messages and all that directly to underclassmen that are in the junior class 25. So that's already started. The key here, and go by what they do, not what they say. You've heard me say that before. This is really important. Where does a recruit go on his first or second visit? Does he pick the swamp? Does he go to UCF? Does he go to Georgia? Does he go to LSU? It's all over the place. I'll give you an example. I know DJ Pickett very well. I've known him since he's in 8th grade. The rarest kid I've ever seen is a defensive back. He was 6'1" something as an 8th grader and shutting down guys that were seniors. It was ridiculous. He's got offers from everybody. Where does he go on his unofficial visit? He lives in Zephyr Hills. He's an hour and 45 minutes from UF as it is. Do they get him on campus? That does matter. So they need to focus on some of those kids while you wrap up. It's not easy because recruiting is so broad now. Coaches, and it's one of the reasons a lot of college guys are heading to the NFL just to take a back off. They don't want to deal with it. You find out who the grinders are because your social life, your family life, your chances of staying married all diminish. It's just true. It is very strict. It's not normal to be a football coach. It's not. Most people try to work 40, 45 hours a week. They're working 60. So you have to find a way to get, especially with the elite kids, and there's so many good players in the class of 25 anyway, but the state of Florida is freaking loaded, even by Florida standards. They got a lot of work ahead of them. So there's even a kid I already have on Flip Watch that's committed somewhere else that I think very well can end up at Florida. So, I mean, it started, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, I feel like for 2020, it's just insane to me. It's always going to be
it is to me too.
That it's like, oh yeah, who's going to be in 2024's class? We don't really know definitively yet, but we're looking at 2025 too. But if you're any of these coaching staffs, how do you sell a kid on 2025? Like, how do you sell a kid on, in 2 years, you're a year and a half, you're going to be able to make an impact here with just so much time between. Is it just straight lying? Is it just like gaslighting these kids and being like, yeah, no, early playing time, don't worry, we know for sure what our team's going to look like at that point?
If any coach does that and the kid picks the school, I'm a little concerned about the relationship that young man has with his confidants around that are so-called adults, because they're not advising him very well. If you can't see through that BS, oh boy, that's a whole nother show we could do right there. I mean, Brandon, that's good stuff. Here's the deal. The kids that commit early, generally either A, that's the school I always wanted to go to, and or they've recruited me really hard and it was just a mesh with the relationship. There it is again from the get-go. It happens. And sometimes that falls apart because the guy or guys that they liked leave. Early commitment, again, I've said this 20 times on your show, but it's not about the logo. It's about the person wearing the logo. So Napier is a pretty good recruiter. He's got a pretty good staff. Who stays? If they can get through the first 3-4 years of his tenure with a lot of guys staying on staff and they build continuity, they're going to roll pretty good in recruiting.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out. This past offseason, Florida lost co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach, which, regardless of how you feel about Patrick Toney, you have to say it's kind of an upgrade because now you get Corey Raymond selling the safety room as well, since he's got all DBs and he's the dude there. So it's a big upgrade at that point, at least. Lost wide receiver coach Kerry Colbert to the Broncos. Lost William Peagler, tight end coach, to the Arizona Cardinals. So you've had some coach turnover before. Didn't kill too much. It happened after signing day, so a lot of these kids were already on campus. But we'll see Florida maintaining that, because I think Billy Napier's done a good job of hiring like young coaches. He's got a huge coaching staff, hires young coaches, but I feel like at that point you also risk, hey, if you're a good young coach, I want to poach you and give you a promotion. So I feel like that's kind of the trade-off that you have to deal with at that point if you're Billy Napier, at least for the future, looking on towards building your coaching staff.
You're going to have attrition. It's, look at Nick Saban. That guy goes through more coaches than anybody. They're still pretty good. If you're worth your salt as a head coach, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I feel like those guys getting good jobs is just further indicator of like, oh, okay, so you made the right hire. It's just that they were too good and didn't stay too long. Thank you so much, Brian. This is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Also, Brian, you do something else now for Locked On, right?
Oh, that's right. I know Florida fans are excited to know that I am not a Miami fan, although the rumors on your Twitter page, or excuse me, your YouTube page, have stated otherwise.
They're not even rumors on YouTube comments. They're facts, according to it's facts.
I am the new Locked On Seminoles host. So just so you know, I am not a Miami fan. I'm not a Seminoles fan either. I am an analyst and I'm a recruiting guy. I just happen to cover both schools.
And you will be on Locked On Gators every week. So really just Florida's the everything school. You're the everything analyst for us. So that's how we're taking the approach now. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back later today for two-a-days, our second to last day of two-a-days. Hurts my heart. But we talked linebackers yesterday. We're talking corners this evening for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33, and I'll see you all tomorrow.